So let's start with part 2. So in the part 1, what we have done is like set up a server, set up a client. Both of them are based on Ubuntu Linux distribution, and we have installed Strong-Swan, which is an open source IPSEC software suite, right? This part of the video concentrates more on Amazon side of things. So how do you set up a virtual private gateway? What are the different components that are involved in setting up a site-to-site VPN? And at the end, we will also see like what is involved in changing the configuration on the server itself. So whenever you see IPSEC, the first thing that should flash in the mind is virtual private gateway. So virtual private gateway can do integrations with DX and also IPSEC. For this part, we'll stick with the IPSEC. It's a managed service. So when we say it's a managed service, the entire software upgrades, downgrades, scaling, horizontally, vertically, everything is managed by Amazon. They take care of the availability and also the redundancy aspect of the VPG service in itself. When it comes to the routing, right, it has offerings of static, or it can also do BGP based dynamic routing. The lab that we concentrate is on static, and then there will be a version of the BGP implementation. When we go into the BGP, everything operates on a private autonomous system numbers. So BGP has two parts. One is the public version, where you have public autonomous system identifiers, and then you have the private, where it starts from 64.512 and trends upwards to 65.534. If you do not select anything, then the default configuration is 64.512. The only mode that supports is ESP. There is another mode called AH as well, but VGW supports only ESP. So when you speak about the VGW or virtual gateway in itself is not a part of VPC. You can detach and attach to any VPC of your choice. The only catch is like you can attach to only one VPC at any point of time, and if there is anything that changes, you can detach from the VPC and then you can reattach to any other VPC. That's all fine. It's not a service offering within VPC, it's an offering outside of the VPC. Now the service itself has like policy based routing and the regular routing based. So when it comes to PBR, care must be taken on the number of security associations. This is not a huge topic on IPSEC itself. I'll provide some links on what are security associations and how it differs from PBR versus non-PBR implementations. And if you're doing like static or dynamic routing, one important thing that you should like keep in mind is the number of routes, or the route scaling is to a maximum of 100. When you spin up VGW and create a site-to-site VPN, it actually gives you two tunnels, and Amazon intelligently like places both the tunnels in two different AZs. That doesn't mean you have to have your VPC in a different AZ, right? So you can still have it in your own standards. It just offers redundancy. So let's go ahead and like start configuring the VGW. So everything starts at VPC. So we will go to VPC and we'll work onto the VGW. We are going to implement this in the Ireland region, while our data center is simulated in the Frankfurt region. So on the left side, if you scroll down, there is a section called Virtual Private Network or VPN. In that, we should see Virtual Private Gateway, Customer Gateway, Site-to-Site VPN. So we'll first go ahead and create a Virtual Private Gateway. So we can give any name of choice. So I'm choosing Amazon's default ASN. We spoke about this, right? So we can still choose a custom ASN as long as it's not a public autonomous system number. And that's about it. Like it's pretty straightforward. You go ahead and create it, and the state itself is like detached. Now you can have it attached to any of the VPCs, but the attachment can only happen to one VPC, and it can be any VPC within the region, and the VPC should be managed by the same account. Like you cannot have attach it to a remote accounts VPC. That's another restriction. So we'll go into the actions, and in the action you should be able to see the option where it suggests us to attach to a VPC. So let's go into the options. Yeah, let me select the VPC first. Let's attach the VPC. I have my VPN VPC. As I've said, like you can, like it's listing out all the available VPCs within that region. So I'll create this VPC, and while it's getting attached, right, it's of type IPSEC, right, and it's using 64512, which is absolutely fine. Let's go to the other aspect, which is the customer gateway. So virtual private gateway is the one that connects to the VPC. CGW on the other hand is the customer gateway setup. So this is some redundant configuration. Let me delete this first. Delete it. So let me set up the customer gateway. You can give any name of your choice. You can stick to any ASN. As long as it's a private ASN, that's fine. Now there is an IP address section as well, right? So before we go there, just to show you the example, I'm changing it to 6500. The IP address is the public IP address that your VPN server is on. So let me go to Frankfurt and grab the public IP address. So that's the public IP address. I'm not using any certificates as of now. And the device name is optional. I'll just use whatever name that is there on the server. So it's VPN server there. So I'll just put VPN server. And that's about it. Like now you have the customer gateway. Now you need these two pieces of information, or rather the setup, to get nicely into the site-to-site VPN connection. So you provision both the gateways, and we'll use this information in setting up our site-to-site VPN. So again, name is of your choice. We can select virtual private gateway or transit gateway. So we chose VPN on VPG. So that's the BGW that we configured. We have an existing customer gateway, so that's the one. As of now, we'll choose the static routing. And interestingly enough, when you choose static routing, since it's not dynamic, you need to like actually configure the routes. Now these routes are the routes which are not associated with your VPC. These are the routes that you want your VPC to know about. So these are the routes which are on the VPN server, right? Many people like confuse and they like configure everything. It doesn't matter if like even if you put the VPC route, most of the times it won't matter, but it's technically wrong because it's still the route that is expecting is the remote end route. So for in our case, it is the VPN client subnet, which is 192.168.1.0. So let me put it there. And the CIDR, again, this is not the routing per se, but this is like what's the interesting traffic that wants to get into the tunnel. So I would say that's my LAN 1.0, and the remote IPv4 is on 10/24. Just giving the supernet. You have like various options here. So you have for redundancy, you have 2 tunnels, and within every tunnel you can enable VPN logging. You can use default options. or you can like set up the pre-shared keys for each and every tunnel and create more options. We'll go with the default ones. And this is probably the step, like it's going to be in a pending state until we complete the configuration on this server, right? So click on it. On the top you see something called download configuration. So the download configuration, depending on the type of device, you can export the config, which is very handy. For us it is Strong-Swan. So let's download it. And once that is done, let me open it in Atom. Atom is a text editor, so let me do it. And let me get that onto the screen. Yeah. So for configuring the VPN itself, you practically need the first 4 steps. But if you are to plan the redundancy, the scripting for automatic tunnel backup, then what? So from there on, like, there are other options where you change the kernel configuration. The most important aspect that we'll do is, like, we'll not configure tunnel 2, it's not required for lab purposes, is edit the configuration of this server in a way that it starts behaving as a router instead of a client. We'll configure the necessary IPSEC configuration for tunnel 1, and then we'll also configure something relating to the pre-shared key, and that's about it. Like, we'll touch 3 files, and once we touch those 3 files, this conditional working setup of an IPSEC VPN will be achieved. If you want to move further into the modifications, then you can like go through the document and like have it configured for policy based routing or a tunnel based routing option, or if you want to like configure for a permanent setup, then you can like follow the other steps. Whoever wants to like verify the Amazon side of things, it's sufficient that you stop at step 4, and that's more than enough. So the first and foremost thing is, like, you need to make sure you configure and change the etc sysctl configuration. And if you don't change this, it won't become a router. This has nothing to do with the IPsec, and this comes into play when in part 3 when we try to like route the client traffic. So let's go into the server first. I think this is the one. Okay, let me be on the desktop. This is client. So 1.101 is the client. So let me get into this server, which should be 1.200. Probably this one. Yep, this one. So let it the etc sysctl, and we'll just change one option, which we will enable packet forwarding for IPv4. So that's from the sysctl, and for this to take effect, we need to like load the configuration with another command. So that will be sysctl -p. So that loaded and refreshed the file. So let's go ahead and let's try to configure the IPsec configuration file. Now all the files related to IPsec, at least on Ubuntu distribution, is on /etc. So we copy this tunnel configuration and this has different aspects. Let's say what is my IP, what are the neighbors public IP, what is the IKE mode that I am using, what are the lifetimes, what are the interesting tunnel traffics. We did choose the specific LAN segments, but it's still like generated with all zeros, which is still fine. Like we are okay with it. So let's go there. Edit it, and we'll edit the unique IDs. Just uncomment it. And let's try to copy and paste the config. And that's about it. Like, now that you're done, let's see if the IPSEC configuration comes up. Let me enlarge the screen. Sudo IPSEC status. Yes, none. Probably I have to like restart the session. Let me restart it. Restart IPSEC or IPSEC restart. Let me see. It's IPSEC restart. Okay, let me verify it again. It's still 0, and it's pretty strange. It's generally usually very fast, trust me. So one aspect that you should probably consider is, these are some things that I encountered when I was trying to set up IPSEC VPN, is have you allowed the necessary configuration in the EC2 to allow the IPSEC packets that are coming from VGW are not filtered by any sort of firewall. So that's not the case. So if you see the security, I'm only allowing port 22, and that's the reason why like it's not able to process any of it, right? So let's edit the inbound roles. As of now, I am accepting all the traffic. That is absolutely fine. We are in a labbed environment, and hopefully this should solve it. Let me restart it. Probably that's why. It's still not there yet, and there is another thing that we might have to consider. I did say that we have to touch 3 files, right? And technically we have only touched 2 files. One is the sysctl config, and the other one is the IPSEC config. There is a third file. We did speak about the pre-share key, right? So if you see the step number 4, right, that is where you have to start configuring the IPSEC secrets. So that's under etc IPSEC secrets. So copy the file. It has 2 public IPs and the pre-shared key, which will be used by left authentication and right authentication there. And I promise this is the last one. After this, the VPN will come up. So let me go ahead and edit it. Make sure that you have like the spacing taken into consideration. So let's see the status. We'll restart it just because we have configured the file. And let me do a restart. And we can clearly see now the tunnel is established 3 seconds ago, and it has like an interesting traffic configured, and any packet that takes this source and goes to that destination through this server will be encrypted. If you go to AWS console, that has moved into the state available now. And if you go into the tunnel details, we can see that we only configured tunnel 1, so tunnel 1 is up, and it does give you timestamp. There are like CloudWatch metrics which are associated with this, and we can even monitor the CloudWatch. Now the next things are like, how do we get static route from VGW get propagated into the VPC, and what happens during that phase, what are the different configurational changes that goes through that phase, is something that we'll explore in the last part of this series. So that's about it. Thank you so much.